Hey all, this is Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis. Good to see you. Of course, this is William Green over here, and today we're going to chat about catasetums and kind of what to expect in the fall. It's September 26th, so for me, none of my catasetums are dropping their leaves, but for some of you folks north of here, you might be seeing some dormancy signs, and William and I are just going to chat about that today, and he's going to ask some questions, and I'll ask some questions of him, and we'll just chat like we always do.
Right. Well, good to see you again, Stephen. Thanks for meeting with me today to address my catasetum issues.
Yeah,
Um,
my pleasure.
it, it's weird because I get kind of my catasetum Bible is, at least online, is Fred Clark's description of catasetum culture on his website, Sunset Valley Orchids. And he seems to suggest that a lot of the catasetums bloom kind of late in the growing season, and I don't. That may not be the case with all of them. So my questions today are going to be more like, my plants don't seem to do that, or at least not all three of them. So what do I do when that's not the case?
So first of all, it really depends on the background of the parents. So there's a lot of catasetums that will bloom early in the growing cycle. Catasetum pileatum is a very common one. It's that sort of big, round, flat flower, often red or white, or it comes in a bunch of different colors, but that's going to bloom in the spring. Catasetum tenebrosum is another one. It's a real common one. It's sort of a dark one with a yellow or greenish lip, and that's going to bloom as the growth is just maturing. Denticulatum does that. And between those three species, denticulatum is the spotted one that makes everything smaller. Between those three species, you're going to get spring bloomers. You're also going to get some, and then when you mix them all with these other ones, you can get spring, summer, fall, especially on larger plants. Um,
When you say spring bloomers, I'm under the impression that most of the Catasetum family, in the spring, they're actually just starting to grow again. So where would the spikes be coming out of? Out of the old dormant bulb?
no, it's actually the new one. So what you'll see the new growth is starting to elongate, and then you'll see another little growth pop out. And if you're not expecting it, you're like, oh, that's going to be two growths.
Mm-hmm.
But what you'll notice actually is the new growth is very pointed, whereas a bloom spike it has a very rounded tip,
Mm.
and it's kind of a subtle difference, but once you've seen it a few times, like, oh, that's a flower spike. So they'll sort of grow concurrently, with the bloom spike kind of in front of the growth, and then obviously the bloom spike will get larger faster, and then it'll bloom before the new growth is done growing. So it really depends. And some of these Fred Clark auras, they have they've got cloacia in the background, and if it's like Rebecca Northern in the background, or some of these other spring sort of winter spring bloomers, you'll get blooms in the dead of winter.
The
um,
cloacias, yeah, I feel like the cloacias, they shed all their leaves and then they put out their spikes.
that's for the really common, the little ones that are really intensely fragrant, and they're white or pink, and they've got that frilly lip. But there's another group of cloacias that bloom in the summer actually,
Okay.
and they're the sort of goblin. They're sort of green and striped, or it's like a white flower, kind of sometimes attractive depending on your
And your
perspective.
aesthetic.
Yes, exactly. And if those are in the background, it'll bloom in the summer. It could bloom in the summer.
Well, the plants that I have to show everyone today, none of them are species. They're all mixtures of two or more genera. So I would hope maybe a lot of our viewers would have similar plants because there's so many hybrids out there these days. And hopefully what we learn about these plants will also apply to species or to strict Catasetum hybrids or strict Cloacia hybrids.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like most of your blooms will come in spring, because my collection now is just spike after spike. Everything's just going crazy. So I would say it's more common for these fall bloomers. But if you don't get a bloom in fall, don't be disappointed. It could just be holding out for winter or spring.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm gonna pull out the first one that I've got. This one's actually in spike right now. So I'm gonna start out with this one. This is that famous hybrid Cygnotis wine delight. It's a cross of two genera. It's a what is it? A Mormotis and a Cygnoches, I think.
Yeah, Cygnotis or
Cygnoches.
Cygnoches. I've heard both. I don't think either one is wrong.
And that actually, when I learned that, it was cool because it's kind of a primary hybrid between two genera. So it's not got a whole lot of different stuff mixed up in it. It's just two things.
I think it is two species, so it is definitely two genera, but I think it's actually two species, so it is a primary hybrid, and I'll have to look this up after the video, after we're done recording this to make sure that's true.
Yeah, I know
Um,
one of them is Mormotis. It's called Sinuata, perhaps.
yeah, it's
And then
Sinuata. I
then
can't
the
remember.
Cygnoches is Lemanni or something like that. Is
Okay,
that one?
yeah,
It's
Lemania.
those
So
two. Yeah, it's
yeah,
those two.
yeah.
So this guy, not this exact plant, but this clone was awarded in 1984 with an FCC from the American Orchid Society. So it's been around for a long time. And well, it was in the 80s, maybe 86, I'm not sure. But I'm super proud of it this year because, as you can see, uh, past years the bulbs were cute little bulbs, you know. Then last year it was growing in the greenhouse. It got lots of light, fertilizer, and water. And then this year I feel like it just kind of took what it had last year and ran with it.
And
So
it got serious.
I'm super thrilled. And do you think also that, Stephen, this could just be a result of age? Like they just, as they get older, they get bigger?
It's a combination of two things: age, and culture. That's really good culture. I mean, you'll see a lot of growers who maybe aren't watering as often as they should, sort of stall out at that last year size growth and be like, yes, that's where it should be. And no, you see that growth that you're showing us now with the spike,
Yeah.
that's where it should be. That's when you want to start thinking about, okay, that's probably as big as it's going to get. And you know, maybe in subsequent years you
Keep
could
pushing it.
keep pushing it. Yeah.
I know that you say that the pet method is the best way to grow these guys. This is not in the pet method, so who knows, right? If it had a water reservoir, it might even be even.
It could, and there's only one way to find out, of course. But I mean, if you're not growing with that method, the PET method or the PET method, um, you know, just in sphagnum. That's how I did it for,
Yeah,
you know, more than 10 years,
yeah.
and like
I
I had
guess I
great
should say,
results.
yeah, this is it's in a tightly packed top layer of sphagnum, and then it's just bark in the bottom, and that's it.
Yeah, that's
And it
perfect.
just it never allows to dry out. The new growth started pushing out in February, so it's been pushing out for a while. But something that I think is funny about this plant is that I've never gotten more than 6 flowers on it. Even last year's, I thought for sure I was going to get a lot of flowers. Last year I got 6, so this year we got 2 spikes, and we're hoping that we might get more than maybe 7 or 8 flowers this year. I hope.
You know, maybe 6 on each spike. Who knows?
That'd be nice. So yeah, super proud of this guy.
Yeah, it looks great. And that's the thing, you know, we mentioned potting media and these guys, they're not picky. Like people grow these things in cow manure and they do great.
Yeah, you'd think that cow manure would just absolutely burn the roots to pieces, you know?
Yeah, they just thrive in it. And like, I've never done it. I don't know if there's a trick or what, but I don't think you're gonna use it fresh. I think you kind of want to let some
Oh,
of those
it's got to be
salts wash
compost
out a little
manure.
bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know.
All right. So that was Cygnotes wine delight. Cygnotes wine delight. So the next one I want to show you is this guy. This is a much smaller plant. This is Mormodia. So this is Jumbo World. It's Cloecia Grace Dunn by Mormodes buccinator.
Okay.
And this is the one I've had the longest. I've had this one since 2014, 2015 maybe. And the bulbs don't get, this is about as big as the bulbs get. So this year we're looking like we're on track, more or less same size as last year, maybe slightly smaller. This one had a pretty serious bout with 90% alcohol,
Oh,
courtesy of moi.
and it burned
Uh,
it.
yeah, these plants, I mean, you probably have experienced this too. They tend to be spider mite magnets. And
Yeah.
it started. I started seeing just hordes of them and little webbing and all that kind of stuff. So um, I had a bottle of 90% isopropyl alcohol handy, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna get you mites. And this is what happened to the leaves. I mean, they just absolutely were fried.
Wow.
So it may have set the plant back a little bit, but I can say that this plant is a very reliable bloomer every year. By October, it's pushing spikes and it's usually in bloom around the winter solstice or early January. So this
That's
one's
cool. And you
this
can
one's
see that
great.
that one's going dormant. That one's, there's probably other viewers who are saying whose plants might be in about that position. Maybe they've lost half their leaves and they're kind of
Hmm.
wondering, what do I do now?
Yeah, this one goes dormant. It's just like clockwork. Every year we get close to October and they just start turning yellow and dropping off. And
Yeah.
it's just it's nice to actually see. It's grown in several different conditions and it's always kept that regularity. So that's been nice. And then the flower spikes on this guy will actually trail down. And so I kind of have to set it up on something so that they can trail down and then the flowers come out. Most
So,
I've ever gotten on it was around 60 flowers. Last year we had about 11. So it just depends. If it doesn't have a good growing season,
hmm,
it's not going to have a good bloom season.
60. That's that's great.
Yeah, no, it was great. There's a picture of me on my Instagram with I'm like holding it up and I've got like four spikes like all over like a
Oh, I do remember
waterfall
that.
of flowers.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so what do you do? What are your techniques when the plant is in that stage?
Well, since this was my first one, like I said, I went straight off of that Fred Clark website, and as soon as the leaves started to turn yellow, I stopped fertilizing, or at least I greatly reduced it.
Mhm.
I would still keep the medium moist, but as soon as the leaves were pretty much all dropped off, I would really, really reduce the moisture. But even then, I would still keep it I would still, I would still water it because while the spikes were developing, the bulbs would start shriveling up, and I didn't want them to be shriveled after while it was producing flowers. So I kind of keep it moist, not soaking wet, but moist until the flowers are all bloomed out, and then I just stop, So what I would say by mid-January, this thing doesn't get any water until, you know, late May, early June,
And
and it does just fine.
yeah, I mean that's sort of your textbook example of what to do, and a sort of a nice textbook example of the plant dropping the leaves at the right time, and you like you said, you back off on the fertilizer and then you back off on watering, but it's not getting dry yet. You keep the plant hydrated through that flowering period, which is of
Mhm.
course metabolically expensive, um, and then let it dry out.
Right. And
Yeah,
I should
that's
have mentioned this with the Cygnotis Wine Delight. I've had in 3 previous years, I've had spikes to start pushing out and then to just dry out.
hmm,
And I'm wondering if it's because, typically the spikes are pushing out this time of year, late September, October. And this is kind of the time of year that I always read that you're supposed to start reducing water, reducing fertilizer. And so that's what I did. And I was wondering if that was actually what caused the spikes to abort, was the sudden reduction in nutrients and moisture. And maybe the plant's like, oh, wait, I can't bloom if it's already starting to go dry.
it's certainly possible. A change in conditions that are sort of unexpected by the plant can certainly do that. That's one of the more common questions. Like, hey, I got my spike is this long, or there's buds already, and they just fell off. And it's such a difficult diagnosis. But yeah,
Frustrating. Yeah.
I find that it's typically, maybe somebody moved the pot at the wrong time, and so that the sun angle changed at that like a really critical time, or like you said, you're just changing the water maybe a little earlier than the plant wanted. And so really the key to it's kind of like cooking. You want to cook to temperature. You want to cook your meat to temperature. You don't want to just time
Overcook
it.
it. Yeah.
You don't want to cook to time, because you pull that burger off and, oh, well, it's still raw in the middle. I should have used the probe. Catasetums are the same way. If you like, well, it's September 1 or October 1, no more fertilizer and water,
Right.
but the plant isn't expecting it, that might not necessarily be good. You want to wait till your plant gets to that stage where it's dropped half of its leaves, and then start switching up the conditions, the watering and the fertilizing, because that's the plant telling you, hey, I'm ready for these drier conditions. I'm ready to go to sleep for 4 or 5 or 6 months or whatever.
So what you're saying is that you kind of read your plants and you give them the conditions that they look like they're ready for. You don't impose dormancy on them.
Pretty much. I will say that when I was growing inside, which was this time last year, my greenhouse is still pretty new. If everything was outside, and a big cold front was coming through and I had to bring everything inside, I don't have room for plants that are this big with all their leaves. So I just cut those leaves off. Boom, boom, boom,
Yeah, I
boom.
remember last year you posted that. You cut all the leaves off. It was like,
Yeah, yeah,
what? How could you do that?
yeah. And that kind of initiates dormancy. It's not bad for the plants. I've never seen negative effects, but you kind of want to wait if you can
Right.
until the plant tells you what to do. Kind of forcing dormancy by cutting off all the leaves. If you got to do it, you got to do it. It's better than your plants freezing outside, or angering your significant other who doesn't want your bedroom full of fully leafed out catasetums.
Right. And all the bugs that they brought in from outside
And all the
too.
bugs. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, you got to kind of choose. You're going to live with somebody.
yeah,
Like, I want to live with you, not with 40 orchids.
yeah, exactly. So
But
um,
yeah, this one's really reliable, and it got a lot of attention at the Denver Orchid Society last, I don't know if it was December or January. Everyone really seemed to like this one a lot, and I love it. Actually, this plant was given to me by someone in Lexington, Kentucky, in 2015, I believe, who they bloomed it out for the first time, and they didn't like it. They said that the color was kind of muddy. It wasn't really green. It wasn't really yellow, but I found that temperature has had a lot to do with the coloration. Like when I grew it in a cool sunroom, the green was more pale and it had real bright blood red spots. And then it was when it's grown more, kind of warm, the spots aren't nearly as dark and the green is a little richer too. So it's interesting that you see
yeah,
that.
yeah. Temperature and light will play, and this is true for all orchids. Temperature and light play a big role in how dark your flowers are. And like you said, cool temperatures will make them darker, bring out those reds, and brighter light will do the same thing. So, I've got a bunch of flowers that bloom throughout the year, and during the dead of summer, it's usually, the blooms can still look nice, but the color is best when you can get those fall or spring blooms when the temperatures are a little cooler.
Hmm. Yeah, you
Yeah.
see a lot of difference. All right, this next plant that I'm going to show you, I'm going to read the description of it first, and then I'm going to show you the plant, okay? So it says, this is a new direction in Fred Clarkara breeding. The influence of Milana Davison will assure that plants stay under 8 inches tall, so 8 inches for our metric people is about this much, which makes this a mini Fred Clarkara. We know about the influence of painted desert as a parent, producing offspring with excellent form, color, and flower longevity. It is also a small growing plant that matures at only 6 inches tall. Here we paired it with the superior colors or flowers of the mini Catasetum, Milana Davison. This combination will make this Grex a star. I'm excited about this one. And I'm so glad that it's a miniature because I couldn't take any more big plants in my collection.
Man, that's like a forearm size pseudobulb right there.
It's pretty big, yeah. So assuming this is labeled correctly and it is the plant that I read the description for, this is the SBO hybrid 6728. It was recently named as Fred Clark or Desert Davison,
Hmm.
Painted Desert Milana Davison. And I've had this one for 2 years. This was last year's bulb, and I did not get any flowers, Steve. And I was really disappointed because I thought this would definitely be blooming size.
If I had that plant and I didn't get blooms last year, I'd also be like, what the heck? But sometimes they're just shy. They just want to get it right, and they're gonna hold on to that energy and say, I'll do it next year. And I guess that happened for that one. I I would put money on the fact that that next bulb, the one with the leaves, will bloom, and your miniature Catasetum, your miniature Fred Clarkiara there
Yeah.
will have blooms. And but I mean,
The
we were kind
question
of
is
talking about
when,
this.
Steve. When we're getting
Yeah.
to the late season. I'm just every day. I'm just like, got the microscope out. Is it going to bloom from here? Is it going to bloom from
I mean,
here? Is it going to bloom here? I
I can
recently
see a
saw a
bump.
picture. Go ahead. Sorry.
I can see a bump there from here,
You can see bumps.
on the bottom, down. Yeah, right there.
You think that's a bump?
Is that a bump?
Well, let's say it's not enough of a bump to get me excited. We'll put it there. We'll put it that way.
I'm a
I
little
mean, I'd
excited.
like for it to be, but yeah, it's. I'm not excited. I'm not excited about it.
Hey, can you put it up to the
Hopefully we'll
screen?
see something.
Let's see it. Let's
Oh,
see
you
it
want to
close
get,
up.
you want to really get up there. Okay. Unfortunately, as I get closer to the camera, it does not focus well,
Oh,
but
it's like a joint that goes all the way around, and may have
yeah, it's
gotten
almost like a
swollen.
depression, really.
Interesting. I would throw it in the corner and forget about it. Stop looking at it. It's like a pot of water that you want to
Right.
boil, and you'll come
Um,
back in 2 weeks and it's got this big spike coming out.
Going back to what we said earlier, as we get closer to the, end of the season, do I reduce water anyway, or do I just wait for the plant to tell me that it's ready to start changing seasons?
I don't see any reason to fertilize it anymore. You still
Really?
could, but maybe not as heavily. But certainly keep it wet. I feel like there's, kind of like we were saying before. I feel like there's a lot of people that will see this and say, "Oh, it's almost October. I'm going to stop watering," and you'll see those bulbs go, and
Yeah.
it's not ready for that.
Right. And I would
Um,
think that a complex hybrid like this with like three different genera, I mean, it's gonna just in general be a little bit more. It's gonna require that dormancy less, right?
yeah, yeah. The complex hybrids are certainly more forgiving of a wet winter. And there, it's this sort of debate online, like, oh, well, I've got this Fred Clark aura and I don't have to stop watering. Yeah, that's true. It also doesn't need the water, so why would you water?
Right. It
Um,
still has these big bulbs for a reason, right?
yeah, they're there for a reason. I think it's when people cut their teeth on these Fred Clark auras and then like, oh, I can grow these Catasetums, they're easy, and they bring home a denticulatum and it dies on them in 6 months because they watered it all winter long and they don't understand why this one is okay with this and then this one is not okay.
Right.
Um, I always say, um, for to really increase your odds of success with this group, give them a hard winter rest with no water whatsoever. If they get wet, I mean, Peleotum has a really short winter dormancy, and they seem fine with extra water early on. It doesn't mean that that's going to work well for you in your conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that Jean Monnier actually told me. I went and visited his house when I still lived in Hawaii,
The
and he
namesake, might I interject, of the Moniara, was it?
Monnier.
Is it? It's not the After Dark. It's the Millennium Magic Witchcraft that
Hmm.
so many people have.
Yes, exactly. Jean Monnier was the Fred Clark of a few decades ago. He had gem orchids. Gene, Gene, is the gentleman that ran the company. Gean, Jean, is his wife. So they're both named Jean, which I didn't realize until I called them. And I said, hey, can I speak to Jean? And she was like, which Jean? And I said, oh, I guess Mr. Monnier. And then for those of us who've been growing for a while, Cygnotis Jean E. Monnier is named after his wife. That's a primary hybrid between Bartiorum and Cooperi, and it's one of the sort of the bases of a lot of the Cygnotis breeding. And it's a beautiful primary. And I asked Fred if he would ever make these primary hybrids again, and it doesn't sound like he will. So
Mm,
it's too bad.
it's
But
up to you.
Yeah, but the whole point of me telling that story is that Gene said, "Hey, I asked him about dormancy, and he said, I found that if the temperatures don't dip below 55 degrees, you can keep watering them, and they're not going to rot. So if you have that temperature range and you want to keep watering, I mean, again, like I said, I don't know why you would, but you can, and it'll be fine. I know I spoke to Roy Tokunaga over at H&R Orchids, and they used to have a few Cygnotis and Catasetums in their list some years ago when I still lived in Hawaii. And he's like, we don't ever get below 55. They get watered once a week all winter long, and they're fine. And that sort of plays into that. So, you know, anybody listening to this and kind of trying to think what they should do for winter,
Yeah,
I
like
recommend,
me.
yeah, I recommend just drawing it out. That is sort of the surefire way for success for this group, regardless of whether it's a Fred Clarkiara, a Catasetum, a tricky one, an easy grower. They're all going to do well with a dry dormancy. They might not do well with a wet dormancy. So,
Yeah, and Fred Clark's website I keep mentioning says if you haven't seen any signs of dormancy by January 1st, just stop watering completely, and you'll initiate it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe I'll just keep watering up until then, and then just stop.
I have seen that happen. So let's say it's November, December, and for whatever reason, I'm watering a plant still, and maybe I go on vacation and I don't water it, and I come back a week later, and all the leaves just boom. I mean that dormancy can start like that with just at the right time of year. It can start really quickly.
Do you think I should just keep watering like normal then until the plant starts showing me some yellow leaves?
That's what I'm doing with
And
my
there's
plant.
a chance it won't ever show yellow leaves, right? Like,
It's possible. I've seen people in January and say, "Hey, my plant looks just like yours with all the leaves. What do I do now?" And the great debate about a dry winter rest starts. Uh,
well, last year I feel like I started the dormancy when I started everything else. I don't know if it had any effect on whether or not the plant would decide to bloom, but this year, just to change it up a little bit, I think I might just keep it moist until I start seeing some yellowing leaves. And if January, February, March comes around and it's still green and it starts putting out a new growth, I mean, okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So now that you're growing indoors under lights, I assume do you have a timer and you're changing it every month to
Yeah,
be shorter and
I'm
shorter?
trying to cut off like I'm trying to match the lights off in here with sunset outside.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I grew inside, and I've still got some, I'm pointing to my inside. I've still got some inside under lights, and they're the little babies. And just every month, I just turn it back an hour until I'm at 10 hours. And then for 2 months, I go for 10-hour daylight. And then I start every month, I'll just add an hour until I'm up to 14 hours, and then just every year. And that should help. That should help get that guy to drop his leaves.
Just shorter
Um,
days.
the shorter days, yeah.
Hmm.
Especially, you start backing off fertilizer. Maybe you go back home for Christmas and you come back and a leafed plant is no longer. It's
Right.
it's dropped everything.
They do tend to wait for me to leave before they do things.
Yeah, they're
Like
jerks.
the Bulbophyllum echinolabium that I affectionately call Hal. I grew that thing for 3 years. It just put on growth after growth after growth after growth after growth. I was like, what's the trick to getting this thing to bloom? And the trick was leaving for 5 weeks.
Benign neglect.
Yeah, when I came back, it had 3 spikes on it. I was
Yeah.
like, you little bastard.
Yeah, every now and then you just got to freak them out and they're like, "Oh, I got to breed."
Right, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I'm going to die. I got to get my genes out there.
Cool. Well, those are my catasetums.
Yeah, we were chatting before the video, and I said I wanted to have some props, but I looked under all my entire collection, and one single leaf on one plant has dropped. So I had nothing to show that looked like dormancy.
If you
After
want to
this, I'll
see a collection of amazingly grown, beautiful, and unusual Catasetum species and hybrids, definitely check out Steve's channel if you haven't already, because this guy has got recently the one that Mato Grosso Ense, like
Mhm.
that one was super cool because it's just this little thing,
Mhm.
like That's, I
That's
mean, it's like I didn't even realize they came in that kind of compact size. It's
that's the true miniature that you were expecting for that other plant.
right.
Yeah, denticulatum small like that. Tigrinum and some of the more unusual varieties over there have that small stature, and I think Fred is using those a lot in his breeding. Maybe not Mato Grosso ants, but there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And actually, when we wrap up with this, like I said, I've got a lot of spikes. I got some blooms. I'm gonna do a show and tell of a couple blooming plants, and I'll post that later today. And
Cool.
yeah,
Well, if there's nothing else, always a pleasure, Steve.
yeah, I think that's it. It's great to chat as always, and I always enjoy your videos, and I look forward to seeing more. And as you sort of expand your journey from a greenhouse and you're coming back inside
This
and
monstrosity in my apartment.
and see how that tent growing goes.
Well, hopefully, I don't know about you. What I would like to talk about next time would be your favorite Cattleya walkeriana, because the one that I have from you, it's growing well, and I'm just on it. You know, I want it to bloom so bad. I hope that we could at least talk about what to expect from that species. This late in the year as we get close to its flowering season.
Yeah, we're getting to prime time for that guy, and I'll have some props for sure for that. And I actually just got some imports from Floralia of Walkeriana and
Oh, nice.
Nobiliors, and yeah, it's one of my favorites, and I got lots to talk about for that guy.
Cool. Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Green, and I will talk to you later. You have a great weekend, and everybody out there, leave comments below, ask questions, and we will answer as best we can.
Yeah, let us know what's going on in your Catasetums.
Yeah, exactly. Which ones are sleeping already?
All right. Well, take care, everybody. See ya.
See ya.